Britain's historic vote to break away from the EU has fired up the war of words again between our presumptive presidential nominees. Hillary Clinton lashing out today at Donald Trump's response to the referendum.
On Friday, when Britain voted to leave the European Union, he crowed from his golf course about how the disruption could end up creating higher profits for that golf course. Even though within 24 hours, Americans lost $100 billion from our 401ks. He tried to turn a global economic challenge into an infomercial.
And Trump's hitting her for taking the side that lost.
I got it right, and Hillary got it wrong, and Obama got it wrong. They sort of get everything wrong, John. They get it wrong. They get it wrong all the time. And that's part of the problem our country has.
So while we talk about how it might be affecting us, Nigel Farage, who was one of the UK leaders that led the fight to leave that referendum, he was on Neil Cavuto exclusively earlier, and here's what he had to say about that.
No, your position, and you may have your problems, is nothing like ours. We finished up until last Thursday with 70% of our laws being made by foreign institutions, with our own Supreme Court being overruled in Luxembourg, and with an open border to 500 million people. Whatever problems you've got in the USA, they are as nothing to what we've had as part of this Europe. And what we did last Thursday is we said we want our country back.
All right, Tucker Carlson, we'll get you in here. So he's saying it's not exactly a parallel, but as Americans, we always make everything about ourselves. But there are some similarities,
right,
of our election. Do you agree?
I think Britain is to the U.S. what California is to New York. It's a glimpse into the future. If you want to know what this country could look like a generation from now, you look at the U.K.
California, yeah.
That's been true for generations. The truth about the EU, this is a complicated thing. I mean, people who support Brexit should not pretend there's no economic cost to it. There is. And hopefully it'll be short term, but it might not be. Their economy is probably going to contract. On the other hand, in the last 40 years, Britain has become weaker internationally. It has become more dependent upon the finance sector for its economy. And it's become demonstrably and critically less English. And not just in the appearance of the people who've moved there, but in their attitudes and in their behavior. And so if you wake up one morning and your country looks nothing like the country you grew up in, you have cause for complaint. And people like Hillary wave their hand and call you a racist. That's a real thing. I'm sorry, it is. It's an ancient country and it's totally different. It's a big deal.
It's one of the things that Peter said about the EU was telling British butchers that they could no longer package pork chops the way that they used to with the kidney next to it. And it was like little things like that over time just grew to be bigger things, including the Court of Human Rights. Eric, can I ask you on the market point that Tucker just brought up?
Which I completely disagree with.
I do. The market point or the what?
No. See, what's changed? So I've been looking at this, and I've been I'm racking my brain. I hear everyone talking about, oh, this is going to be a slowdown in the European Union, in Britain, and this is going to be terrible for their economies. I'm trying to figure out what's changed. Supply and demand are pretty much going to be the same they were prior to the vote. So there's global demand. If global demand slows down, that won't be because of Brexit, in my opinion. I think this will actually help the continent. I think because England, the UK has been so strong economically. It's been one of the three feeders to the pie. Germany, France, and the UK are the big suppliers of funds into the EU, whereas a lot of countries, some of the pigs, the Portugals, Italy, Spain.
Germany.
No, I'm sorry, those people are takers. So okay. There's the makers and the takers. Great Britain has been the big maker. I believe that this is going to be good for them and for the global economy. Everything's so globalized right now. The only argument that I could see slowing things down, I think it's going to be very, very tiny, irrelevant. It would be cutting off their nose to spite their face on both sides would be if they did some sort of, you know how they're open borders right now? So if you're a German national, you go to England, you can work and you don't have to have a work visa. Well, if they start putting work requirements and visas on those, it may create a bureaucratic nightmare, but I don't think it's going to slow down the economy.
But a lot will depend. I hope, of course, obviously, I hope you're right as a supporter of Brexit. But don't you think much depends upon how the EU handles this? If Germany decides to punish the UK, it could be a problem.
Yeah, but what would they? You know, I mean, at the end of that, look, they're the continent, and they want to continue to have people doing business. London is one of the global financial centers in the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Singapore. I don't think that changes because they leave the EU.
Let's bring it back home a little bit with Hillary Clinton. We talked a little bit about how she seemed a little tone deaf on this, but she actually, until today, she hasn't actually said anything about it on the record at all over the weekend. Instead, one of the things she did was showed up as a surprise to the Gay Pride Parade here in New York City. So that was the visual of her over the weekend. She didn't get involved in the Brexit.
Yeah, so that was a good choice for her to do, especially to kind of rally her constituents, her base. She's always said that she's a big proponent, supporter of the LGBT and questioning community, except when she's accepting money from the Clinton Foundation on behalf of, countries that hang gays and lesbians, so that'd be a problem. However, bringing it back home here, she's not going to say anything about it because what's she going to do? Oh, my bad, my bad. Like, she called it wrong, right? And it also, whether the exact specifics match up in little pinpoint perfect matches isn't the point. The overarching idea is that this is a rejection of globalism, and it's more about nationalism and focusing at home and about borders and about immigration and about making your own decisions for the country that you have skin in the game for. Where I think it's going to have an impact, it's going to take a little bit to unravel it, is defense spending, because the UK was providing a large portion of that for the EU, and I think that could be slightly problematic. But when you have a big fish like the, London and England and everybody dropping out of this, then what happens? I mean, who's going to pick up the slack? That's what I worry about for the rest of them.
And they need strong economic growth to pay for that kind of defense.
Yeah.
Juan, before I go to you, can you take a listen to the campaign manager for Donald Trump? This is Paul Manafort explaining that this is a rejection of globalism. Take a listen.
What happened with Brexit was people taking back control. I mean, again, the faceless bureaucrats in Brussels and Strasbourg who have ruled and told the Brits how to live, and making promises to them that their lives would get better, and talking about a future based on globalism versus the family and the individual and local community. Those are the same issues that have caused the angst in America today. And this election in 2016, where Donald Trump is the only change agent, is set up perfectly on those same themes because Hillary Clinton is the epitome of the establishment. She's been in power for 25 years.
Juan, I actually applaud the way he explained that, because that's probably the best explanation I heard all weekend.
Right. I mean, the thing about it is Hillary Clinton just dealt with Bernie Sanders, who's an even bigger change agent, if that's what you want to say, and clearly came back and said to the voters on the Democratic side, at least, that she can make promises and has experience in order to deliver real change as opposed to just empty promises, which is exactly her charge against Donald Trump, that he makes huge promises but has no way to deliver on them in terms of real significant change, systemic change, if you will. I would argue, by the way, with Tucker and with Eric, I mean, I look at the stock market. I see the stock market today is down 250. I see the pound is at a 31-year low. That does not help the British. It doesn't help my 401k. It doesn't help anybody to see the American and global economies contracting and reacting as they are. So you could say, oh, well, gee, this might be short term. Tucker, you said it might be short term.
I hope it will, yeah.
And I do,
it might not be.
But it might not be. And I think right now, if you listen to the economic experts, and these are people who are not in the political game, they're trying to, make money for themselves, they are tremendously concerned. They're worried about not only what's going on in Britain, they're worried about China, and they're worried about Trump here in terms of his anti-trade policies and what it could mean in terms of economic recession.
But you don't want to confuse the health of the finance economy with the health of a country. There are other factors. I think that's a real factor, by the way. Stock market, its performance matters to all of us. But it's not the only thing that matters. If you have a 1,000-year-old country with a distinct language and culture and history, and all of a sudden it erodes in 2 generations, I don't know, that is a factor.
Well, it is a factor, and I think they've seen a spike in immigration, although I saw that there have been studies that indicate that there was anti-immigrant feelings, very strong ones, in Britain, even before the spike, because of just what you're talking about.
That's what Brexit was based on. Brexit was a vote on anti-immigration.
Well,
that's what it was.
Some people say it was.
Well, come on, if you're going to ascribe it to anything but anti-immigration, I think you're maybe misreading the tea leaves. You talk about global economies slowing down. Versus because 2 days on Wall Street were down. I mean, that 2 days in Wall Street is a blip. It's only it's a couple of percentage points, and Wall Street hates surprises. They hate surprises. So going into the Brexit vote, Wall Street was up 250 points the day of the vote. These betting markets.
Yeah, why were they
the betting markets missed this by 1,000%. They just they were listening to the vast majority of what you heard on television in Europe was that they were going to remain. It was going to be a remain. Meanwhile, some of the tabloids are saying, hey, not so fast, be careful, because what we're seeing is something completely different, a little bit more nationalism versus globalism. And so the betting markets were caught off guard. The Wall Street was caught off guard. They hate that. But when nothing has really changed economically, nothing has really changed.
Let me tell you, something
last
really,
week to this
something really changed, and I thought you hit on it actually when you said, imagine the EU is going to respond now. You're seeing efforts by the English leadership to say, oh, slow down, we're not going to take steps to get out of the EU right away. We're going to do this gradually. The EU ministers are saying, no, you guys get out, take it, and we'll put in tariffs. We'll put in requirements, new requirements that make it more difficult. And guess
now,
what?
Would that be
the financial
about
hold on, let me finish.
Especially
the financial
from the
industry
country who
is
adds
leaving
the most
London.
into the economic
you
pie.
Said,
why would you go after
you said
a country
financial
that means
industry was
most?
number one, right? Financial industry is number one in London in terms of what's going on the continent, right? They're all now saying, you know what, it doesn't make sense for us to be in London. We could be elsewhere. And guess what? Scotland, Scotland, Wales are saying, come to us. We're staying in the EU.
If New York decided to pull out of the United States, people would stop doing business globally, overseas, because New York wasn't part. No way.
I think
London will be a global economic financial center going forward.
I can explain the whole reason why this happened, and it's one reason.
Immigration.
Nope. Elizabeth Hurley. With the flag.
She was supportive. She beat out David Beckham.
This is what happened. Yeah, that's
we don't have enough time to debate all the immigration.
I'm going to reenact it.
It wasn't just immigration, in my opinion. But guess what? The other thing that happened in England today, they just lost 2-1 to Iceland. So it might not be very happy at my house tonight.
What?
Uh-oh.
What do you think? Soccer, the only thing that matters.
Tell me you have to work
football.
late.